Hey there, folks. Welcome to another edition of Stranger in a Southern Land. I, of course, am your host, Jake Manning. Today in the program, I have the very funny Tom Simmons. Tom, who you might recognize from Comedy Central or BET's Comic View, or from his show, So Then There's This, which past episodes are available on YouTube. And he has a very funny episode about Superfly Jimmy Snuka and the current predicament he's in, so I highly recommend that you check out that episode. Tom is a very interesting individual and very opinionated, and I feel very fortunate, very honored to sit down and talk with him. He seemed to be a little bit more interested in my pro wrestling and my shot putting career, and I seem to be very interested in his comedy career, so we kind of interweave that conversation throughout this podcast, and it's pretty interesting from a third party's perspective, I can imagine. But I always felt very lucky to sit down and talk with Tom before we hit the stage at Tremont Music Hall for Tree Monstrous Comedy Wednesday, who is our sponsor this week on the podcast, Tree Monstrous Comedy Wednesday, which is hosted by former Stranger in a Southern Land guest Nick Alexander, where he holds a comedy show every Wednesday at the Tremont Music Hall, at least while they are open. For more information, make sure you log on to TremontMusicHall.com. And I also want to make sure that I read that ad right about our sponsor, because I'll be performing for Tree Monstrous Comedy Wednesday this Wednesday, November 4th, in a pro wrestling stand-up comedy mashup show. Me and Zane Riley and several others will be performing on the show, as well as headliner Joe Pettis. It's going to be interesting, to say the least, and I'm very excited for this, and it'll be interesting to see how pro wrestling and stand-up comedy kind of mash together. We'll see what happens. We'll do our best, that's for sure. But anyways, make sure you do your best to follow me on social media. I am available on Twitter at ManScoutManning and on Instagram at ManScoutManning. If you have any questions about the podcast, make sure you email me at jake@sslshow.com. Or if you want to book me for an upcoming wrestling event, make sure you email me at manscoutmanning@yahoo.com. Anyways, without further ado, let's jump into this very funny podcast with the very funny and interesting and opinionated Tom Simmons, here on Stranger in a Southern Land. Anyways, folks, I'm here with Tom Simmons. Tom, thank you so much for joining me today on Stranger in a Southern Land.
Oh, I like that name.
You like it?
Yeah, I do. Well, obviously, it's obviously a literary reference. I can't. It's obviously Stranger in a Strange Land. I can't remember the author of that or when I read it, to tell you the truth. But yeah, I like that.
It's a little play on it because I'm from Iowa and I've felt like a stranger in this southern land. So that's I'm trying to get to know people.
How long have you been here?
10 years.
Okay.
So
yeah, I'm not a true Southerner either.
Yes,
my wife will remind me of that not constantly.
Well, is she a true Southerner?
Yes.
Okay.
Greensboro, North Carolina. So born and raised.
Born and raised.
Yeah.
Well, how'd you end up with her? Like how did those two worlds meet?
She was in college she had two roommates in college. One of them was a comedian, actually. It was when I was early on in comedy. So her and her other roommate came to hang out with him at a gig he was headlining in Fort Myers, and I was the middle on that show. And so we sort of met on the phone really quick, and then we just hit it off like instantly, and then I could tell you that she was a DJ in Gainesville. So once I sort of had that in my head, I had to go do another gig, and then I sort of stopped in Gainesville on my way home to Atlanta, which I normally wouldn't have done. And then I listened to find a female voice on the radio the next day, figured it out, called the thing, and she answered. I like to joke around. I was caller number 5.
Yeah, pre-internet, you had to really do some work to find people like girls you like.
Yeah. Well, I didn't. I just had to pick up a phone and hear her voice once, and then we instantly sort of laughed and hit it off. And then I saw her in a different situation where I was like, you kind of stop and look at somebody again. So I had sort of that going, and I didn't know that was the same girl, and it just was. So it was a lot of. I was actually with somebody else at the time that was ending. It was all. That was good. That's how it met. And then this is Greensboro. She'd left Greensboro to go to school. So she came back here when I went to New York, and then we got a motorhome and drove around the country for 3 years, living in an RV.
Okay.
Telling jokes.
That sounds, like I said, you had to do a little bit of work when those long distance relationships.
Yeah.
A lot of work. Like when I got together with my girlfriend, she was living in Kentucky, and it was more like, which app do you want to talk to each other on? Do you want to use Snapchat? Do you want to use Voxer?
Yeah.
You know, back then it was just had the telephone. Now it's like, which app do you want to use?
Yeah. See, I have it. That's interesting because that's all escaped me. Some of my friends still talk about it. You know, I feel like it's easier now online. It feels like it would be, but
it seems like it's a lot more. It seems like it's a lot more work. I'm glad I got out when I did.
Yeah.
Like dating and to now is like impossible.
Yeah, everybody says that since we were 20. You know
Exactly.
what I mean? But it works.
Exactly.
You know?
But anyways, you know, you talked about growing up in New York. Where in New York exactly is this?
So I grew up in New York, but that's like 6 years, and then my parents my mom and dad got divorced, and then to Illinois, like outside of Chicago, like
Whereabouts?
a suburb, Rockford, Illinois. Which
Yeah,
is
I grew up in about an hour north of Davenport.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I know exactly where Rockford is.
Oh, yeah. So Rockford, and then we lived in. My sister was like a big time figure skater also. So as she sort of moved up the ladder in the country and in the world at her profession, the next training facility up, you know, she would go to where the better coaches were or wherever her sponsor was. So she moved to Atlanta, and then about a year later we all moved to Atlanta, and then to Janesville, Wisconsin. So it's sort of a mutt, but Atlanta in the South is sort of where I adopted as like, I like it down here.
Yeah, because the weather's far better than
Yeah.
Midwest
Yeah.
Rockford area where
It doesn't
everything's
feel dirty.
flat.
Yeah.
Where it's just that flat and that wind would just come over and just chill you to the bone.
Yeah, and it's where I went to high school and stuff, you know, where you have your first job and all that stuff happened in the South. So that's what I count as home. But yeah, I know what you mean about being a stranger in a strange land.
Yeah.
Are you conservative, liberal, and is that something you even want to talk about, or is that
Absolutely. Well, I'm sure that's going to come up in this conversation after reviewing all the video clips of you online.
Right. I feel like I joke around about how I feel like very out of place. Like,
yeah, definitely
when it comes
for me.
to that, like, and I'm constant. I don't know why I'm constantly surprised by it. It constantly touches me off guard. Like, oh, people don't think like I do.
Yeah.
That's just.
I just took a trip through the Midwest, and it was like Louisville, Cincinnati area, and I stopped by the Creation Museum. And like I thought there'd just be full of people going in there as a goof like I was, but then seeing true believers there.
Yeah. It just shows you. I mean, the power of our minds to believe whatever we want to believe.
Yeah.
You know, But I used to do a thing for a while during the debate here in North Carolina when they were having the gay marriage amendment thing, like when that was happening, the vote. I was doing a podcast at the time, and I started going to churches again, which I hadn't been to in a long time. I was Catholic and Episcopalian, but so I would just go into like a Baptist church or whatever, and I started live tweeting services. And I would go in, and, right?
So I love that. That's incredible. I love that.
Yeah, it really was connected with people for a while, but it's like after 8 months, it's like now I'm just going to church, you know. So it starts to be like, this guy's good. He's really, you know, like that. This is
work now.
Work, getting up every day trying to find a different group of people to go, and then it's how many jokes can you do about like the 12 apostles? So it's like. But I would go in there and sort of heckle and listen and heckle and observe. And so I went to Cincinnati. Speaking of Cincinnati, right around there too is where they have the 50-foot Jesus thing. I don't know if you've seen him. He's standing there at the side of the road with maybe it's 500. It's a huge. I don't know.
Yeah.
So I went there for that. It had burned down, and so I went there to that church and live tweeted that service. It started with the guy here in North Carolina that was like. I'm again it, you're again it, God's again it. He was like, we need to get all the gays and all the lesbians together and put them in a giant fence, and then get another one for the homosexuals and another one for the, you know what I mean? And then they'll just die off. Like that was his thing. Like, so, and then that church got a ton of support, and like the whole community.
I thought you could say hate mail, but then you said support. So I was shocked.
They did get that. They got that because when I showed up, like there was like they had police dogs there making sure because they had some threats, but it was just packed with supporters, and that was the only church I was thrown out of when I was like tweeting. Everybody else was pretty welcoming. You know, there was a little bit like at first I was very uncomfortable, but I got over that.
Well, where did that whole idea of being kind of politically minded and kind of seeing things like that, like what did that come in growing up? Because for me, I've always been that way because, you know, my father was very big in the church and small town politics. But then my mother, who is a media specialist and librarian, she's always told me, check your sources, know the facts. So that kind of clashed and created this. So where did that come for you?
That's a good question. I don't know. I didn't really I think I was reading books. I just was reading a bunch of like fiction and blah, blah, blah when I kind of started to read after like 22, 23. And then somehow it occurred. And plus watching comedians like Carlin and those guys, it was like Sam Kinison, and thinking, man, those guys are speaking the truth, and you know what I mean?
Because at that time, like, nobody was doing that, and the only people that are doing that were comedians.
Yes. So to me, yes, I saw comedians as like the cultural gunslingers that were like holding society up to, you know what I mean?
Yeah, because
it was heroic.
Yeah, because Tom Brokaw is just going to say what's in front of him and what's brought to him, and he's going to read that off, but nobody's really speaking the truth and how you feel, and especially...
And I don't even know if I am, you know what I mean? I try, but, sometimes you do that and people just stare at you like you're a freaking weirdo, and so you got to try to figure out a way to win and make people laugh and not, I won't bring that up. That makes people uncomfortable.
Yeah, because you're kind of supposed to be liked on stage. You can't just offend everybody.
Yeah, and in real life. I can offend everybody on Facebook. That's what I kind of do. And then it softens for the stage because you want to, you can't just be up there like...
Yeah, because people got to buy tickets.
Yeah. What fun is it to be like, everything is terrible, I don't know.
But it was mostly comedy guys that maybe probably sparked that inside.
Yeah, I really don't know. I mean, I grew up with constantly question things. I guess my parents were funny. I was probably the least funny in my family. I just learned like I could make people laugh in school and stuff. And if I got good grades or whatever, then I could get away with whatever. You know what I mean? And I could say the thing that people were thinking, but they don't really say. And I would say it to the teacher or to whatever, just be a smart ass. And because I was doing well, I got to tell my son, if you're doing well in school, then that gives you leeway to sort of be the funny smart ass and to say the thing like, why would you're leaving out one of the elements or whatever, you know what I mean? You're allowed to speak up more if you get
to be good or be good at it.
Yeah. So I sort of had, to, through moving around, I guess, make friends through laughing and blah, blah, blah. So that sort of came. And then, I don't know. It's weird that I've never really thought about it before. And then at some point I was in a bookstore and I was like, somehow it occurred to me that all the greatest minds of human history had already thought about all these issues and all these things in the world. And I'm reading Tom Clancy and, what am I doing, So I'll start reading, Twain and then Martin Luther King. It just got like the people that we revere as the greatest minds. It's like, well, let me see what they thought. So I just started reading some of that. So it's all reading and whatever jokes. I don't know. I don't really have a goal of I'm going to be a political comedian, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but it's obviously something very easy you can pull from because it's definitely the most dysfunctional thing in this country, and it seems to, Lately,
I'm feeling like it's the reality show that everybody's watching. So I'm almost like I don't even want to, like Trump is like Trump to me, especially at first, was like the Lorena Bobbitt story back in the day, where you're like, okay, everybody's going to be talking about this joke, this thing. So I'm not even going to pay any attention to that. I did that with the lady that killed her kid in Florida, whatever her name was, that got away with it.
Oh, Casey Martin, I think.
Casey Anthony.
Casey Anthony.
Yeah, where it's like, all right, I'm not.
Yeah.
Not tuning into this story.
Yeah.
So that's what I was trying to do with Trump, but it's just too overwhelming, right?
It's still at our face. It's still there. It just won't go away.
I love
it. And it gets bigger.
Yes. There's a guy here in like the Charlotte area that has a talk radio show late at night. I was driving through and he's one of the right wing kind of Obama's ruining this country, blah, 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 one of those guys, and he's anti-Trump. And so, but they have to fight the audience that they created, that they catered to. Now they have to be like, they don't want this guy, but now I don't think they realize.
You've conjured this up into reality.
I don't think
You've said his name 3 times, and now he exists.
Yes,
Congratulations.
I don't think they realize the level, the sort of mentality of the people that are their audience. And now they're like, what? You're that dumb? Oh, no. Like my son wants Trump. He's 10-year-old. So I was like, we'll watch this interview. And he was like, that guy should be president. And it's like, because he sounds like a guy running for grade school president, like we're going to get longer lunches and recess twice a day. And, no, you're not. Take your posters down.
Yeah. Like what you say is good, but it was to justify being a misogynist pig. Yes. But
I realized if I want to argue with a 10-year-old about whether he should be president, then I should just go back on Facebook.
But yeah, so like that just, first impressions of you, it seems like that, But you said that you had to always entertain people and make people laugh because you were always moving around. You had to move into a different group, make people laugh. But what made you want to like do comedy? Like, what was the thing?
I don't know. I wish there was some way that I could be like, I always watched it and dreamed of being one. It just never occurred to me that it was even a thing. And then,
because you're like, oh, I'm just funny, and then Lauren Michaels will pick me up when I graduate high school. I'll be on Saturday Night Live.
No, I didn't even think about it. I didn't,
like they were over there, and
I didn't really start seeing comedy that much. I guess I saw it here and there growing up, you know what I mean? Like seeing whatever, some Steve Martin or whoever was the guy then, you know what I mean? So, but I don't ever remember being like, comedian until probably senior in high school when I saw Dice Clay and the Rodney Dangerfield specials, and that one had Hicks and Dom Herrera and Robert Schimmel, and it was just great, that kind of time. So then I started to notice stand-up then, and then I just sort of fell into it, and I was drinking and partying, and people were like, you should get up on stage. I was like, yeah, I'm hilarious, and then I just started to, and then
how'd that
you
first
get those
time go?
laughs, and it's like something about it is like and then as I started to notice, like that's, to me, they were the smart asses. They were the guys that said whatever. They were the guys that said the inappropriate thing, and I was like, I can do that. I'm funnier than that guy, and he's on television. And then that's how I think a lot of comics get started. They're like, I'm way funnier than half these guys I see on television. That's what all my friends say. And then you do it, and you realize, oh, I'm not. This is hard, But somehow the even a little bit of laughter when you first start is just like, it just gives you like the juice, I think that's why hypnotism works, because those people think they get that rush of hearing laughter, and they don't realize they're not killing. To them, they are, and then it starts to sort of feed on itself, and their inhibitions are sort of gone because of the meditative state or whatever, you know what I mean? And then that they're not hypnotized, they're just getting that juice from that show, Yeah. So,
well, how was your first time on stage? Like, how'd that work out for you?
First time went great. I did a bunch of I had a bunch of friends there, and I was drunk, and I just had that, like, like when you're shooting pool and you can hit every bank shot, you know what I mean? It's like, I'm fun. So I just was, and the contest was based on applause, and there was 30 people there, and 20 of them I knew, so I win.
Yeah.
And so I went back to the finals of the contest, 3 months later, and I didn't do one show in between there or there. I just thought, oh, this is easy, and then it was awful. It was like a room full of people that I didn't know, and I just was awful.
Yeah.
Because that's,
Well, then
you gotta be good. You gotta do it. You gotta get on stage and tell the jokes. You can't I'll do this tonight. Sometimes that can work, but most times it doesn't. So you think you're funny, and you gotta learn that. So then I started to sort of do open mics and think, I'm gonna be good at this, and whatever. I was you just find those. Then you get a gig here and you get a gig there, and then next thing you know, you're a comedian. You're not really I didn't start off to be a comedian. It was like something just sort of kept.
What pushed you? What was the thing about it? I mean, you could have just stopped whenever you wanted, but what was the thing that attracted you to it?
I don't know.
I mean, was it the sense of control? Was it the sense like, I got 5 minutes to say what I want and people are going to listen? Well, maybe they will, maybe they won't, and they might laugh. That's the goal.
Yeah, at the time, at the beginning, I was just like, it was like getting attention for being at a party, you know what I mean? It was like I would just drink a few beers and get up there and just try to just make everybody laugh. It's like you would at work, So, and then I started to figure out by watching it, like, oh, all right, there's a way to do it, and then you meet other people that are comics, and they sort of start to teach you stuff, and then there was a bunch of books on writing, these Gene Perret he was like a Bob Hope and Phyllis Diller writer, so there's a lot of...
I think I read that book in college.
Yeah,
I remember
4 or 5, and then Hazlitt had Comedy Writing Secrets, the guy Melvin Heltzer, there was a few, so so I would read all those, and then just like the guys today read Judy Carter or whoever the new thing is, so I started to realize, you write jokes, and then I really like writing jokes. So it's just the way my mind works. So that's it. Like I write jokes, and I want to tell them to people. I want them to hear them. I want to see if they laugh, and usually it's just stuff that I laugh at that I'm like, it's weird. I don't have it as much as I used to. Like, I can't wait to tell this, and I don't know if that's because instead I posted on Facebook. You know what I mean? Before it was into a notebook, and then it would be like
You would sit there.
I'd sit there until I could tell it, you know what I mean? Or I could bring it up in a conversation with people, or like sort of get that buzz. Like I would do that to write a joke. I'd tell it to the people in my life, you know, like if that's, or try to sort of set that sort of thought process up and then do the joke. So I would kind of do that. But now I can just put it on Facebook or Twitter or whatever, and maybe that, because now I sometimes don't even tell them, because it's like, oh, okay, that one.
Yeah, because sometimes it's so topical that in the moment it's done. But like I know that feeling, because like, you know, I do independent pro wrestling, and I thought that same way of like, oh, I got a joke, I can't wait to tell somebody on a road trip or something like this, and set it up like a joke or tell somebody the next day. Or before, like even Facebook, I would put it in a mass text and send it out to people.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, because I got something funny I've got to say.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it is that burning, where that comes from. Like, I've got something funny.
That's what I mean. When you're asking, I have no clue where that comes from.
Yeah, I don't even know myself.
Yeah.
That's what I was hoping you'd have the answer. You're supposed to help me figure out my life, Tom.
You
Okay.
Find somebody that's a little bit more introspective, or like have studied them, like maybe Mark Maron. He's looked through himself.
Yeah. but no, like I get that feeling, like you know, and back, you know, probably early in your career, it's like, oh, I can't wait to get on stage to say this.
Yes.
And maybe that was probably the thing that drove you through. Probably especially those early years, I imagine.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't ever see it as a grind. Like it was like, I get to go to you know what I mean? I don't care about the drive. It's like, you know, and then at some point you're like, no, I'm too old to just go sleep on a couch for 3 days and then do a gig on those 2 days and then have it. It's like, I can't live like a college kid anymore. I'm a grown man. So it's like that, you know. So that used to, you don't care. You're just whatever. I'm going to go there and can't wait to get on that stage and that stage and that stage. I still want to get on stages, but you know, I want
to be worth your time in a sense, you know, a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like, because that's where I'm at, like with my wrestling career right now. Like I don't want to be in the middle of nowhere getting $20 wrestling in front of 20 people just to say I wrestled in Arkansas. You know what I'm saying? You know? Exactly.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, and then I feel like, oh, maybe like I should be more passionate with it. Like, no, this sucks. Like this is all, you don't need to do this. You know what I'm saying? You can focus your energies elsewhere.
Yeah. I really believe like, you know, or I did at a time, like just get great and then they'll find you. You know what I mean? That's all. There's no unknown Tiger Woods, you know. There's nobody. This guy, you know,
yeah, nobody comes out of nowhere.
Yeah, no. So it's you get found. I think not everybody, but I think that happens. So you just got to keep grinding and loving doing it. And not so much. There comes a time where you're spinning your wheel. Comics think I'm being bitter when I'm like, the road doesn't. You don't really go anywhere. You got to. Unless you're really working the other stuff, the business side and all that stuff, you're just going to a gig and working on the next joke. And like,
yeah, you just can't.
I love jokes, so it's like, I'm like, that's all I can, like, oh, cool, whatever, okay, I'll write another 10 minutes. This is gonna be great, blah blah blah. And then, like Ralphie May told me that years ago. He's like, "What are you doing, Simmons? You're just making CD after CD on the road. Going, what difference does it make?" Like, he's right. You know, it's like there's no. You got to focus on the other thing. You got to focus on getting the television and getting a fan base. It doesn't, because the other thing doesn't. None of that matters. Just being funny.
Yeah, just going out there and just doing it. Sometimes just in the things you have to focus, and you got to know where you're going to be. You know what I'm saying? Like for me, wrestling, like, oh, I want to wrestle for this company. I want to wrestle for this company. I want to get on TV, but I want to wrestle for this company. And everything's different. Like I had to hone my style, but I never honed my style because I just wanted to go out and do it. And then it gets to a point that I should have honed my efforts in a certain area. Like if I just wanted to wrestle on TV, then I should have looked like a TV star and worked on my body.
Yes.
But if I wanted to wrestle for Ring of Honor, I should have worried about all the flips and the spots and everything else. But if I want to wrestle for this other place, I should have focused on this, you know.
But you just loved wrestling, and you're like, I want to go wrestle?
Yeah. And that's kind of
that's why we're sitting here sweating.
Sweating in a building.
In a building that's going to have 4 people in it to watch a show. That's why.
This is where we're at. Yes. This is documented. At least the end is documented, Tom.
Yes. Maybe we could. That's right. It couldn't get worse. And then the place catches on fire in 10 minutes. Yeah.
Our bitterness alone, Tom, will keep everybody away. Don't worry. We'll be fine in this room.
When I'm at about 20, I want you to do like some sort of running on stage, like chair throw at me. Right?
Only if you need it. I'm sure you'll be fine.
Superfly Snuka got arrested for the like a 30-year-old murderer?
That has been an urban legend and a thing in wrestling for quite some time.
Well, he obviously did it because even McMahon was like, I didn't really know.
No,
wrestling
it was
that well.
it was a time that it seems like they covered it up. Allegedly, I don't want to get in too much trouble, but like it seems like there was a lot, and they make it sound like he was his girlfriend. It was more of his in-town girlfriend and not his girlfriend.
It was a side piece.
Yes, exactly. The best way to put it.
Right.
So.
Yes. Yeah. So he was charged. Yes. So I wonder what entrance music he'll use going into the court. You know what I mean? Like, do they have entrance music for that?
Yeah, I don't know.
Like,
there's been a lot of wrestlers in court.
Guns N' Roses.
Yeah, there's been a lot of wrestlers in court.
Her. I had to kill her. Ladies and gentlemen, Superfly Snuka.
Superfly.
So he got busted because he apparently his alibi was different in his autobiography than it was in the statement he gave to police.
Yeah, probably. I think that's kind of what it
so
stems from.
But
it's always been a sketchy story, too, because it's like, oh, we were walking to the hotel and she fell down and hit her head and then fell asleep and never woke back up.
Yes, his story. Well, his original, which, first of all, what's sad is somebody read the autobiography. I guess if you know what I mean, if you're trying to hide a body, I would do it in a Superfly Snuka autobiography.
Yeah. He's never been much of a talker, an articulate man. So, like.
Well, they give him the death penalty. At least he knows the Undertaker.
Ooh.
Jokes. See?
Man, you know the wrestling world quite well, my friend.
No, these are just some jokes I wrote for the web series.
Oh, okay. So you did research.
Yes, I wrote these. Like and I was doing what we were talking about earlier. I'm sort of setting you up to go like, oh, you're a wrestling fan. Here's some jokes that you might like.
Oh, and you're like, no, I just did my research.
Yes.
But anyways, Tom, you were, said you just wanted to be funny. You know what I'm saying? And obviously
yeah, and I didn't really want to have a job.
Yeah. That was the other thing too.
Yeah. I like sleeping late. I'm sort of a night person. I'm lazy. My wife said when she met me, it was a constant slumber party. So that's sort of my life, So and this and people say when comics go like I only have to work 45 minutes a night. Well, that's a day. If you're only working 45 minutes a day, then you're terrible.
Yeah.
So, which you just proved by doing that joke. You know what I mean? So they, it's a lot more work than I just like to sleep all day, but. I didn't really want to have a job. I didn't, I was landscaping and I dropped out of school and I knew once I started to do it, I'm doing this.
Mm-hmm.
I kept it, this is easy and it's fun. And then as I learned about comedy, I liked it more, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I started to pay attention to what, like, when I was before I started comedy, I loved, like, when I was talking about that Rodney Dangerfield special, I was like, man, Dice Clay, like, that was the guy to me, him and Howie Mandel. Like, Howie Mandel made me fall off the couch laughing.
Mm-hmm.
And then as I grew up in comedy, I started to realize, oh, on that same special was Robert Schimmel and Hicks and Dom Herrera, and all three of those guys, like, way ahead of Dice Clay to me now. So it's interesting how your perspective sort of changes as you do it.
Yeah, I mean that's the way it was for me wrestling. It was like, oh yeah, Andre and Hogan, but then you're like, no, they had Steamboat and Savage in the undercard, and like these guys
were they better wrestlers?
Oh, they were far like that match, WrestleMania 3, Steamboat Savage.
I don't know any wrestling, so
far better than Hogan and Andre, far better.
So why were the other guys the stars then?
Because they were bigger draws. Andre the Giant was the 8th wonder of the world. He was the biggest star. Hulk Hogan was just in Rocky, bigger box office.
Okay.
Much like Dice, bigger box office.
So Snuka was like getting ready to be a part of that explosion, and then that happened, and they were like, you can't be a star.
Snuka was such a big star. When they brought in Hogan, there was concerns that Snuka was going to overtake Hogan's star power because Snuka was a far bigger star for WWF at a certain point in time, but they couldn't put their, faith in Snuka because of obvious reasons.
He could kill a side piece.
Well, not even that. He would disappear when they'd film TV to go find in a bad neighborhood to find whatever.
Right.
Whatever he needed to take. He would just disappear for days upon end. That they wouldn't find him, and he would miss shows. He was completely unreliable. Where Hogan, very reliable, willing to take the ball and run with it. So like that was always Snuka's thing. But he was actually the bigger star when Hulk Hogan first came in.
Oh, okay.
So that was the big thing with that.
See,
they were ready to take over the country, and they needed somebody reliable.
Okay.
If they got behind Snuka, and then that came out. it would have killed the whole thing.
Yeah, it seems like just a terrible like they let him get away with it for as long as they could, almost like it's.
Well, it's like being a celebrity in the '80s. You could get away with everything.
Yes, that's so.
That's
true.
exactly what it was, and it was in like when he was in an area where he was his most hottest. Like he was just as over as anybody else up there.
Just crazy that like within our lifetime somebody could be like, oh, you know, she fell down in a rest area, and you know what I mean. I brought her home, and she was dizzy. That's what happened. Like, and they're like, okay, that sounds right.
Oh, okay.
There's no police investigation?
Oh.
I thought wrestling was unreal.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I thought wrestling was fake. It turns out it's the investigations.
Yeah, exactly. But
So you've been wrestling since when?
since 2003, independently.
Like, what made you get into wrestling? Like, how did you?
Always loved it. That's always what I wanted to do. And I wanted to perform. You know, like that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to perform because athletically, I come from a very athletic background, and it was very clear to me I was not going to be a world-class shot putter like my uncles. I was not going to be.
Really?
Yes.
Wow, you just went more obscure great athlete than I went with my sister being a figure skater. You topped that with shot putter.
Not only world-class world record holder.
Wow, you
Shot
may
putters.
be the only person that can name 5 great shot putters in the history of shot putting. I can't even name one.
Well, 2 of them were my uncles.
Really?
Yes. So Al Feuerbach, he was former world record holder for I think 3 years.
Do you think there should be more appreciation of the shot put?
Oh, absolutely.
Really?
Yeah. It's a physical sport. Maybe hammer throwing probably needs to be. I think actually probably hammer throwing needs more of an appreciation because that is a very difficult event and very fun to watch.
Really?
Yes, because it's basically a shot put at the end of a wire and you just
spin around and throw
that.
it? Oh, yeah.
I did that in college, and like I was actually pretty good at that, and like probably should have stuck with that more just because of my body type.
But why? When could you ever use? Even if you're the best ever hammer thrower,
hammer thrower.
like. That who knows that? I guess that's not the point.
Well,
of who knows
the big problem I had with it is like, oh, I'm getting pretty good at this, but then I'm like, well, I just started doing this like at 18. There are people in Russia and Ukraine that have been doing heel toe turns since they were 4.
Yeah, but you know
so
what?
being the best hammer thrower in America is basically like saying you're the best basketball player in
Peoria.
Paraguay, you know,
Okay.
or something,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's kind of what it was.
It's weird, interesting because my sister just got into, like, as she turned 50, she started like a couple years ago. She started speed skating. She's always been a really good skater, obviously, and so she started doing speed skating and training in speed skating. And there's only like 4 or 5 ovals in the entire country that they can even train at, but. She quickly set all the master records and then made the Olympic trials just as a regular of age skater. She was,
Oh, wow.
8th through 15th or whatever in the races. But still, I mean, that's like that's what I mean when you're like, I had to give up. I was like, I just started. There's some sports where there's 14 people doing it. So if you can make it around the oval spinning, you know what I mean? You got a good shot at being champ.
Yeah, I guess. Because there are other places to go.
How many hammer throwers would you have had to gone through to be one of the best in the country?
Well, in the country, probably just a couple hundred.
Yeah.
Like it wouldn't. If I really focused on it, I probably could have been pretty good because I was making leaps and bounds. Like it was one of those things where like every week I'm throwing 20 feet further, 33 further. Where shot putting, if I threw a half an inch further than I did the week before, that was like monstrous. And plus,
so it's more as you learn the technique. Do you have does your family have a body form that works for this hammer throw?
Well, if I have one for hammer throwing. Shot putting, like I had to be much bigger, much stronger. But
Your uncle?
Yeah, my uncle was very big. I think he was 280 at one point in time, but he said he was at his best when he was about 240 though. But when he went to the Olympic training center, they recorded him on how much white muscle mass he had, and it turns out he was off the charts.
Right.
And white muscle mass is that quick, explosive, reactive muscle, not that red muscle that most bodybuilders have. But he had such explosion. And he actually invented a different style of shot putting because he was so explosive.
He was like the Fosbury or the Fosbury flop of.
He was exactly that for
really?
shot putting. Yes.
So now does everybody use his method of shot putting, or is it
In the glide technique? Yes, The way he does it now which is basically where they just go from the back to the front with their back turned and they turn the front. There's a lot of guys now that do the spin technique,
Right.
which is basically like what they do in the discus, but like the spin technique is very flukish. It's not very accurate, and there's a lot of the world class guys do the spin. But as my uncle will say, I'm like, he always points out that everybody that's won the Olympic gold medal, or a large percentage of Olympic gold medalists, are gliders, not spinners.
Right.
Because you're more consistent, and
If anybody cared about this, they might do an episode of Sports Science on it. You know what I mean? And figure out which one is better.
Oh yeah, like my uncle would definitely be the guy to talk to about that, because he's very much adamant about the glide being
That's
the
just,
better.
I mean, it's interesting to me. Like if you're going to be great at anything, if you're going to be the top guy at that, like your uncle, or like you'd want to be, like you want to be at anything, comedy, wrestling, whatever, you have to put in years of dedication and nonstop work, and this is what I am and do, and to put that into shot putting, and then be like, you know what I mean, and then what, and then like it's just like now you're 29 and you're what do? Do you go? Can you teach shot put? Is there a shot put coach in high school? I mean, how do you make a living?
But that's the
then?
thing with him. He moved on to be one of the best sound recordists in the business. He works for 60 Minutes and NFL Films.
Really?
Yes, but that
shot put it into like his spare time to get him to that. That's so interesting.
Well, he met a girl that was already like a sound recordist. Like she went to Cuba and interviewed Castro, and she was doing all types of big political pieces. She taught him. He bought the equipment, and then eventually he just kept getting gigs, and that's how he got into that. But that's anything athletically. You go through a death. You know what I'm saying? Like that's what I'm going through right now with pro wrestling for me, because at 33, unfortunately, like my career is pretty much at an end.
Right.
But like,
if I knew wrestling, would I know you as a wrestler?
You could probably do Google searches on me, but unfortunately, my name is the Man Scout Jake Manning, and you might want to leave Safe Search on when you type in Man Scout.
Oh yeah.
There's a lot of things that come up if you don't.
I do wrestling porn. That's what I do.
It exists. It's there. I know people that do it.
I did know a guy in Myrtle Beach. This guy, Suicide Jimmy, is hilarious. He did things at some point where he sort of ringside commentated it like porn, where like the people were having it and he's sort of like a wrestling commentator announcing it.
Exactly.
Crazy.
But that's the thing athletically is you come to an end, but it seems like I'm now just kind of figuring out how to do it. But that's the thing that's like attracted me to like comedy, is the sense that now I'm trying to figure out what I want to do with the next 10 years of my life.
Right.
You can always be a funny 47-year-old man or a 53-year-old man.
Right. You're never going to stop being funny.
Yeah.
But it's still a young man's game. Like people aren't going to come see your show unless you're on television or you have a sort of fan base. They're not going to. People just don't come see it because it's good. Mm-hmm. They have to sort of know you. So.
But what's the hustle? What's the grind? Like what's it for you? Like what brings people to you? Like how do you do it?
I don't think I'm bringing people to me. I just write jokes and tell them. So I don't. The way to do it is to do to work to do the. First of all, you got to do the comedy work of writing every day and telling jokes and getting on stage and doing them. And then you got to learn the business. You got to learn what you need to, how you got to build your presence or whatever online, how you start to market yourself when you're in clubs. And after the show, you're not really done. You're still there. Like the performance starts when you walk into the building, and you got to start collecting emails and building a base and working on material over and over and over and doing it in a productive way where it's, the guys that are killing aren't always the best comedians. They're just killing to a live crowd, and then
because those people probably showed up because it seems like to me, and I hear a lot of people say that comedians, they'd have to spend the first 5 minutes getting people to like them. Or now in the social media era, if you've brought a crowd in to come see you, they already know you and they already like you.
Right.
It seems like the work pretty much is already done before you get in the building.
I don't ever know if it's done. You get away with some stuff, but you got to be funny. You can't.
Yeah, obviously.
But I can get uncomfortable and sort of weirdly, like my little self-conscious thing can happen in the middle of a show, and then it's just like awkward and awful for like for a certain amount of time, and then I'll kind of get back out of it by winning by telling jokes. But it's that, I mean, you have to sort of be comfortable and confident when you're on stage. That's one of the hardest parts about comedy for me, is pretending that I'm likable for an hour, or whatever, staying like it's not. It's a show. You got to be the funniest. If you're just yourself all the time, you're not really.
Yeah.
Most of the time, I'm not funny. So it's about doing the editing to get that funny. Anyway, that's not really what we were saying. But you gotta work it. You gotta.
Well, it's what
you
you
gotta
were
work
saying.
the business. You gotta get a good tape. You gotta work on. You gotta get to a city that has comedy every night. You know what I mean? You gotta get to an Atlanta or a Charlotte or somewhere and do comedy every night in all the different venues. Be in front of an all-black audience and be in front of a all-white audience. Be in front of a thing where there's kids there, where you gotta be clean and then. If your goal is I got to get on television so that people will come see me, I'm out to a broader audience, then you got to work on that material. You got to over and over and over do those 5-minute sets. You know what I mean? If you're figuring out how to kill in Salisbury, you're doing it wrong. If you're figuring out how to go to Myrtle Beach and get laughs and applause breaks for 40 minutes, you're doing it wrong. You're like yesterday or whatever, the Mars thing happened, and everybody wrote but they can't have any in California. You know what I mean? So everybody writes that. Not everybody, but all of us fucking write that joke. Everybody. So there will be a certain percentage of guys that are telling that joke for 3 weeks. You know what I mean? Not caring that everybody else wrote that joke. And then their acts are their whole act is that. And then they're killing. And it's I mean, why are you doing it?
Yeah, but it doesn't seem like a lot of sense, because that's not going to be something you're ever going to do again. It's only like you're kicking the can so far when you do that.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't seem like good business sense in my mind.
So but those guys, you got to put people got to come. You got to be likable. You got to work the thing. You got to be likable. You got to slowly build your thing. You know what I mean? I start comedy here, and then now I'm a superstar. It's Eddie Murphy made a special when he was 21 because he's Eddie Murphy. You know what I mean? That's why he's Eddie Murphy. But even if you watch that again and you break down the comedy, it's not very good. It's just Eddie Murphy's funny. Yeah. A guy like Brian Regan, it's 30 years of, I'm sure, getting up every day and writing for hours. Maybe not every day, and touring and writing material and consistently sort of building it, That's how I think you do it.
Well, how long did it take for you to learn those lessons, realize that's what it is?
I'm as I say them, I'm like, oh shit, I should have been doing those.
Yeah. It's always the advice that you give is the one that you should take.
I can't tell you how many times I was told, you need to get to New York or LA and get there. It's get off the road. This is to nowhere. You know what I mean? And get to these cities. You do what people want to hear. And then I was like, nope, I'm doing it my way. I'm doing it. I'm doing the road. I'm going to learn how to be this, blah blah blah. This, I want to do my path. So.
But was the road a good place to be? Could you at least make money?
Yes, because you'd go to New York or LA, and you got to. That's another thing. You got to be willing to take a year and a half, 2 years of not being a comedian. You got to go do sets and go to the open mics and start over and go on reads and try to get a job. In a commercial, you have to get a job so you can be there and start over. And so you have to do that before you're working regularly in clubs, to me, because then once you're working, you're like, well, I could go on the road and get paid and be a comedian.
Yeah,
I want to do that. I don't want to beg for stage time so that I can be standing on stage at the comic strip at 1:30 in the morning for 7 people after I just watched a show for 3 hours where I'm like, I know 20 comics funnier. You know what I mean? It's the same thing you always get. And then, so it's like, I want to go work on the road, tell jokes to crowds. So that's, yeah, you gotta take the time to start over, and then, do sets every night in all those places and do those 5-minute sets. You go to do these contests, right? And guys that have been working the road for ever get rocked by the guys that do 5 minutes over and over. So go get your 5 minutes, You know, if you're telling a wrestler, how would you tell a wrestler what a wrestler's got to do? He's got to get his like a signature move and keep working it and perfecting it.
It's more about figuring out what you want to be. That's really what it is. You got to figure out where you want to be, and it's geographically it is kind of important in a sense. You know, like Philadelphia is a hotbed. You don't want to go to Florida because everybody and their brother's down in Florida. But at the same time, too, like, you know, that's where WWE's developmental is located.
Right.
You know, you kind of want to be in their backyard, but the thing is, you're not going to get any work. The idea is get some work, get a name, get a buzz behind you. But see, there's also things have changed, you know, as far as wrestling goes, because I was probably pretty ready to move up in 2009. But that's when WWE and a lot of people hated independent wrestlers. Like if you were brought in as an extra, which is basically like you show up, they might use it.
You were the guys that worked for cheaper than their guys.
Yeah, but like you'd be like you'd be the guy that gets beat up in like a dark match. You know, like, you know, the guy that gets like 5 minutes on a big showcase that, you know, some people will see. Like if you see those oddball festivals, like they put the local people in the beginning, kind of like that for wrestling, but that's going on every Monday.
Okay.
That is probably the best way to explain that. But, you know,
is this a good market to be a wrestler in?
Now it is, yes. Because now all of a sudden they've took some chances on some indie guys and they've paid off like big time.
Can you go in and wrestle? Can you do that here now? Can you be like...
Oh, you can do it anywhere.
No, I mean you specifically.
Me? I'm a little too old, unfortunately.
How old do you have to be? That's what. Well,
that's the thing. Like they want people that they want to. What I've heard them say, if we're going to sign anybody, we want to be able to invest 10 years in you.
Right.
And see, it's a young man's game. They're hiring people in their mid-20s that have had tours of Germany, Europe, wrestled for Ring of Honor, which is a very prestigious, you know, indie promotion that they draw about 1,000 people or so. It's not like the 10,000 that WWE will draw, but they'll draw that. And, you know, those people get a little bit of buzz. But the thing is, I've been trying to fight into those places where you get the buzz. But I'm trying to do it at 33, and I'm trying to compete with 21-year-old kids that can do every flip in the book. So that's... And athletically, you can only do, you know, you're only limited by what you can do.
Right.
You know, if you're a comedian, you can write jokes. You can get funnier.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
And very few comics can do flips. So you tell a couple jokes while you're flipping.
Yeah.
Dog, that's you know what I'm saying? You can...
If comedy became like the point that how many flips you could do and how many jokes you can tell while you're doing flipping, it's going to be so difficult.
Can you be like a comedian, like you're challenging guys like ringside, like you have just a rack of belts, like you got the World Series of Comedy belt, you got the Laughing Skull belt, you got the San Francisco Comedy belt, you're just
by that time you got all the buzz and the internet loves you, and then they're like, oh, well, we're going to hire this guy just simply because he has a buzz. Because now all of a sudden, like literally like 2 years after that happened, they started like guys would come in and they would give them full-on tryouts and they'd give them a real honest look as opposed to like take a crap in their bag, tell them they're not allowed to eat at catering, kick them out of the building because they don't like the way they look, yell at them if they don't shake everybody's hand in the building when there's like 1,000 people when it comes to production and like, you know, and like just be mean to those people. But now they welcome those people in like, oh no, this is our future. We're going to be nice to you. And that like it's the best time now to get in as a young professional wrestler.
Would it still be enjoyable to you to look at some of those kids that are 21 and be like to coach them, you know what I mean? To show them what they're going to have a lot of raw talent and maybe not the techniques that you have or the experience that they're going to.
Well, none of them will because it takes a while to figure it all out.
Yeah, and they don't know all that stuff, and you sort of. Like you said, now you're ready, and you're like, well, now I'm too old.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
But you know what they need.
Mm-hmm.
So would that still be sort of like wrestling, sort of excited, like where you're like like now we're like a team. I'm helping you do this.
In a sense, I've tried to get that spot with people, but all of a sudden, like they'll go on and I don't want to listen to you, or you know, like I don't need to listen to you, or they'll listen to me for a while, they'll get successful, and then they forget about you.
Right.
Much like everything in entertainment.
Yes.
Now, when you ask that question to me, that makes me wonder: are you that way with younger comedians? Like you see somebody with a little potential and you'll help, and then you go, hey, you know, maybe change this. You know,
I'd say have conversations like this that I'm having with you right now, where it's like you should go to Atlanta, go on stage every night, write jokes and get on stage every night.
Is that your advice?
All these guys well, from here, you know, I don't really know the Charlotte scene enough to. I mean, I know a lot of the comics
Mhm.
But I don't know. I just think of Atlanta as being like because you see the people that come out of there, Andy and I mean Zimmerman came from here too, so somehow he's sort of related to them in Atlanta with the beards, and then Noah Garden Schwartz, the guy that just won Last Comic Standing, and there's like I'm not even naming it. There's just a huge. They just one after the other. They're just like comic after comic in Atlanta because they have all that stage time and they're all busting their asses around there, or the ones that are busting their asses are sort of pushing everybody else around them.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to be the funniest guy in Greensboro or Winston.
Mm-hmm.
So you get to one of those places, and then those guys leave there and go to New York or L.A. or Chicago or there's a lot of good comedy scenes, Minneapolis.
By that time spots open up and people get that opportunity to.
Yeah, and they make their spot. There's spots everywhere. I'm sure there is here too. Isn't there stage time every night?
Yeah, pretty much, except for Friday and Saturday now that football's going on.
Yeah,
Sunday, excuse me.
And then you just dive into that and do sets, and then the guy that's sort of the big dog of that starts getting work, and now he's too good to show up to Monday night over at Scooters. You know what I mean? So now there's that spot. And then so then you move up, and then next thing so that's the way it works. Just probably the same.
Yeah, and that was the big thing with me is I got caught in that time of 2009. The same hot guys on the independent circuit were the same hot indie guys in 2003. There was no forward progression. It was all side.
Oh, yeah?
So, like, everybody was just kind of stuck in the same top guys were right here at this level, and nobody was moving up.
Yeah, I feel like the 90s were like that for comedy.
Yeah?
For a lot of comics, yeah. There's a whole nother wave coming now where it's like there's so many people doing it. It's cool.
Yeah.
Comedy's going to be going to keep getting better and better because there's so many people doing it, I mean, there's a watered down thing that happened, but they push each other. There's so many good guys that are way better earlier than they should be, if that makes sense.
Well, what do you think sparked that?
I think that growing up on The Simpsons, stuff like that.
Well, I mean,
it's a different level. Like they've grown up with good comedy, like that, and South Park, and or whatever. These kids today. When I started, we didn't have jokes. We had to tickle the audience. And then there are so many of them doing comedy that they push. I'm assuming they push each other because only the top whatever certain percentage are getting the stage time.
Mm-hmm.
So they're like, well, what the fuck is that guy doing? I'm going to do that. Work harder, So.
Absolutely. But yeah, because I always feel like we're a culture where we're like this all the time, and everybody feels like we're stuck like this. But I feel like humans can only stick like this for so long before we put it down and go, I want to do what's going on here. It seems like that's.
I don't know if it's getting less than that, or I'm getting more and more like in there. It's. Like
well, I think everybody you get through like let's just say that you for 10 years you're going to be stuck like that, but all of a sudden you decide to put it down because there's a lot of new people getting into wrestling all of a sudden, and me and everybody that I ride with are trying to figure out why that is. Because it's obviously an influx. You're talking about like people in comedy getting good real fast. Same thing's happening in wrestling.
That surprises me. I'm like.
Yeah.
That surprises me. I think of it as the sport that it being affected most by the MMA stuff or whatever.
Surprising or not.
Yeah.
Because MMA, because you got to think about it too. Anytime they get a top star, they're getting ready to retire. By the time they get so over that they're a huge box office draw, they're like two or three fights away from saying, "All right, I'm done fighting."
Oh, really? I don't really know that.
Because they have to have so many fights before they're a bigger deal. Like now, Ronda Rousey's talking about like, well, maybe I'll retire soon, and she's the hottest thing right now, and you're at the hottest thing right now, and then it's like Hulkamania ending in 1988 and never happening, where that's pushed on into the 90s and maybe borrowed a few years in the 2000s.
I think of like I only know like who were when it was biggest. I would say for me that in my lifetime I would think it was like The Rock and.
Yeah, but Rock can still come back now, be on a WrestleMania, and the numbers are all up.
Do they do that?
Yeah.
Do they do that like comics, like Rob Schneider's coming into the arena to fight this week? Or,
they'll do that, and they'll even bring in Rob Schneider himself sometimes in wrestling.
The funny is there's more and more wrestlers doing comedy. There's like 3 or 4. Yeah. There's a guy that was just in Winston. Who's the guy that was just there? Can barely walk.
Mick Foley.
Yes.
He's done a lot to his body. There's a reason why it's a miracle that he even can walk. To be really quite honest.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's been trying it for a while. Roddy Piper was trying it for a while.
What, stand up?
Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder what draws you guys to the stand up.
Well, like so we always get beat up, and then we want to be, we're kind of attention whores in a sense. And also you get somebody like Roddy Piper who is fantastic on the microphone. Like they knew how to connect with people in a sense. Mick Foley was that way too.
Yes.
Like they knew how to tell a story. Like Mick Foley's
Yes.
Mick Foley's promos in '95 were untouchable in
Yeah.
a sense. Like he could tell a story and just pull you in on something. Like I remember, I'll never forget what he
That's
said.
comedy too, man. The guys that can do that on a mic, those are the guys I just watch in the back. Like, man, like they have a way of connecting, like through, like to everybody around them. Like they're the guy when they walks into the room, and it's like they sort of take over with their sort of personalities and their ability to entertain. And a guy like me, it's more about the writing and like I'm going to say these words, and then I got to figure out how to perform now. Like, there's probably some great wrestlers who can't perform, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And so what happens to them?
They usually sometimes they get propped up by a guy that knows what he's doing. That's the difference I think between comedy and wrestling. In wrestling, okay, this guy looks like $1 million, but he doesn't know really what he's doing, or he can't really cut a good promo. We'll put him with somebody that does know what he's doing.
Right.
And for me, that's always been my calling card. When somebody doesn't kind of know what they're doing, they're going to throw me with him because they know the matches will be good.
Right.
And then if they put him with a decent manager, okay, he doesn't need to talk.
Okay.
And then all of a sudden, everybody looks at him as the star. And in wrestling,
Feel like the guy from Bull Durham, the catcher from Bull Durham?
Yes, that would probably be the best way to describe my entire wrestling career.
I think that's kind of a cool, like, you get to be the mentor.
Yeah.
You
know more than everybody else. You can sit in the back of the room and, look upon everybody in a sense. And you got your own little corner. You have your purpose.
Yeah.
But at the same time, too, it's always frustrating because it's like you wanted to be the tools. You know how to get there.
Right.
But that it's just one of those things. But it seems like to me in stand-up you don't have that.
What, like a mentor type thing?
Well,
like
no, in a sense that you
manager.
You don't have somebody that props you up. I mean, people can only put you up so many times if you're not funny.
Yeah,
you can have
comedy,
a lot.
The comedy's it's very supportive. Like it's not, we're dicks, but it's also very we're almost over supportive. Like some people, and like my buddy Danny says, we should let them know to stop it. Stop. You don't have it. Get out of here. What you think is funny isn't. Stop. Go away. You know what I mean? But we continually are like, come on, man, keep coming back. You'll get it. You know what I mean? Mostly, it's the crowds that beat you up. The comics are usually pretty. I think comics are pretty cool people. So.
Yeah. Well, you've been pretty cool so far.
Yeah. I wonder if we're gonna do a show tonight. What do you think?
I think we will. I
don't hear people packing in. What time is the show supposed to be at?
Oh, the show's it starts at like 8:30. We're
What time is it?
It's 7:30.
Oh, okay.
We've been at this for almost an hour.
All right.
So
So have you gotten any of your questions asked, or did we?
Surprisingly, I got all of them.
Okay.
And then we talked all about wrestling. So we've pretty much covered. You've been very generous with your time, Tom. I thank you for,
Yes,
coming in here.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I learn stuff from you. I love that I sort of have always sort of had a thing of like, who would do shot putting? Like you could put in all those hours to be the best shot putter ever, and then what? What do you do with that?
Yeah, exactly. People like my uncle was the best in the world, and nobody would recognize him on the street.
Right. Not even other shot putters would recognize him, probably.
Especially in that day, when all you had was just one publication that was maybe print your picture. Only if you broke a world record. Like, it's not like Sports Illustrated was covering shot putting.
Are there countries where shot putters are like they're known?
Probably it would have been like Russia during like the Cold War. Like he's got some really good stories about when he would do the U.S.-Russia dual meet. Like very interesting stories politically of some things that were going on in that country.
Yeah, it's one of those sports that I'm sort of surprised that they're even still doing. Like that and the discus thing, and they just seem.
Well, it's all part of track and field, and it's all part of the.
They just seem very ceremonial. Like the other things sort of have sort of purposes. Like you could do something like running and jumping and. Where would you ever need like this thing in life besides shot putting.
Well, if you got a box, you need to put up on the
Yeah,
top shelf.
yes.
I've used that skill many a time in my warehouse. I'll tell you where it comes in handy. Doing a little landscaping, you get a branch out of yard, just do a little, you know,
you
heel
need to
toe.
Help your wife up onto the roof.
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying?
That's to help your buddy over a fence when you're running away from the cops.
Yeah.
Like, trust me, I know those. I know that.
Okay, now
Now
makes sense.
now the pieces are coming together.
Yeah, now I want that guy with me when I was trying to get over this barbed wire fence outside.
Well, you know, you've been very generous with your time, Tom. I don't want to take up too much of you. You got a show tonight, so I want you to kind of have a little bit of downtime. But
Yeah,
you
I
know,
need to figure out what I'm going to say.
yeah, that's always the, you know.
Are you on the show also?
No, I'm not on this one. I was just on a couple weeks ago, and I'll be on recently. Nick is very good about cycling comedians out.
Is anybody going to be here?
Last week was real good.
Was it?
Yeah.
But what's real good?
Well, it was real good in the sense it was like the crowd was very interactive, probably about 20, 30 people. But
Okay.
everybody laughed. Everybody was into it. There's been a couple of these that have been, like the one I did, the fans were actually on the whole time, so nobody heard the first half of my set.
Oh, man.
And I was the first one, so that was a little rough.
That tends to hurt a comedy show when they can't hear the jokes.
Yes.
Yes. I did a show for him at another theater somewhere, and it was like at the school, one of the schools. And there was a lot of people there. They had a sketch group. They were good.
Okay.
They were good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Tom, and appreciate it.
All right.